Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to the podcast, and I'm so thrilled you're here today. We're going to be talking about securing powerful consulting client testimonials. I was thinking about you and thinking about these testimonials, and it's so common for testimonials to be one of those things on your to-do list that you know you would like to get some testimonials, have that as part of your process. But oftentimes it's one of those things that never bubbles up in priority. I don't know if you can relate to this, but so often I hear clients telling me, and quite frankly, in the past, I've done this myself. You write down on your, to-do list, I'm going to get a testimonial. This client is wrapping up. And then you think to yourself, well, then now is not a good time. I think I'll ask them next week. And then that week you talk yourself out of it again. And then 2 or 3 more weeks go by. You continue to defer it and thinking there's a better time or that you don't have time or now is not a good time. And then you end up deciding to delete it off of the to-do list because thinking that now the best time has passed, it's too late, and then you never get it. I don't know if you can relate to that, but for so many of us, that's the kind of thing that happens where we know we want to create some testimonials and then we go through that process of talking ourselves out of it, or we think it's just not necessary and skip it altogether. And today I want to share with you a process for securing powerful consulting client testimonials so that you just bake this into the way you do business and you can make it really easy on yourself and easy on the client, and also really valuable for both of you, not just for what you need for your business. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. This was inspired by a couple of clients asking me more details about this type of a process. And so I've given them a standard operating procedure, and I thought I would also record this episode for them and also for you. So this is all client and listener led. So, with that, let's talk about today's agenda and then we'll dive into the specifics. So, I'm going to walk you through why this matters. Why do testimonials matter for you as a business to business consultant? We're used to testimonials for business to consumer, and we might have been used to testimonials, when we were in corporate and the marketing department handled that. But today I want to really dive into why does this matter for you and your consulting business? And then we'll dive into 4 blockers that could water down or prevent you from securing those powerful testimonials. And then we'll shift into 4 best practices that will help you make the testimonials powerful. And then we'll go from there so you can put it into action. To complement this episode, I want to share 2 resources with you. So this goes along with today's agenda. These 2 resources are, number 1, I will give you a list of standard questions that you can use as a starting point and then tailor them for a testimonial process. So you can go find those in the show notes for this episode by clicking the link to get to the show notes in the description of the episode in whatever podcast player you're listening to. Or you can always go to my website. You'll find all of the show notes there under resources. So go look at those list of questions. It will give you a starting point on how to conduct a powerful testimonial process. And I always love giving you shortcuts. No need to recreate the wheel. Second resource that I'll share with you is go look at some examples on my page, and we'll talk more about securing these types of examples or these types of testimonials here shortly. But there are some examples on my website. If you go to Work with Melissa and then Coaching Client Results, you'll see a lot of examples about what I'm talking about today on this episode. And that may inspire you as well to figure out how do you want to display and show the testimonials in different ways to your own clients. So that'll give you a lot of examples there on that page. All right. So, with that, let's dive into the first part of the agenda. Why does this matter? Why does this matter? Why do securing powerful consulting client testimonials, why does this matter for your business? Let's look at it in two ways today. The first is you may have an immediate need for testimonials. You may already know you need testimonials. You've got a very specific reason for them. Maybe you want to update your website. Maybe you want to add more testimonials to your LinkedIn profile as recommendations. Perhaps you want to add some quotes to marketing materials or proposals or things like that. You may have some very specific reasons why you already know you want to have testimonials, or you might be in the bucket of this doesn't really matter. It's kind of nice to have, and I don't want to deal with it because it's uncomfortable anyway. And so today I want to offer to you some reasons why securing client testimonials matters, even if you don't have a specific purpose for accumulating them right now. Think about you as a business owner and where you might want your company to go. You might be okay right now with a process of walking clients through the sales process and selling your work, and you don't really need testimonials. You might be in that situation. You don't find a reason other than, increasing your quality of your marketing a little bit or the website a little bit. If that's the case for you, where you don't see an immediate need for testimonials, I would encourage you to look at this from a longer game perspective and say, you know what? I don't know the reason why I might need these right now, but I want to accumulate the testimonials as I go so that I set myself up for success when I do move forward and might need them. Let me create this bank for myself so that I'm not losing out on the opportunity. That's one way to look at this. This is the long game. You don't have an immediate need right now for testimonials, but certainly there's very likely a need for them in the future. So why not embed this as part of your standard operating procedure with clients? The second reason why testimonials can matter is that they do amplify your marketing. They amplify your case studies. They amplify the way that you're describing, other work and similar scenarios to potential clients that you're working with. So they are a way to amplify. They will not do the selling for you. They will not do the marketing for you. They will not do the heavy lifting for you, but certainly they will amplify if they're done in a powerful way, which I'll share with you here in a minute. The reason why I said earlier when we started the episode that these testimonials can be valuable to your clients as well is that these are collecting a testimonial in a way that I'll share with you here in a minute can be a great alternative to client reference calls. So if you are able to collect the references in a way that's really impactful, then you're able to leverage that instead of asking your clients, would you mind being a reference for me? Would you mind spending 20 minutes on a call with a potential client with me? This gives the client the ability to do this one time, and you're never asking them again to be a reference in any way. It could be a big time sink for them. The other thing that these testimonials provide for you is even if they never see the light of day, they give you this more internal knowledge. They help you to understand what stands out to the client. You know what you think about the project and what was valuable about your project and what your client may have even told you along the way. But getting these types of testimonials can also help you to see what stands out in the client's mind, what matters most to the client, and that can help you as you're moving forward and adjusting your sales process and the way you're marketing and your lead generation and really building up that bank of internal knowledge. A client benefit is also that they're able to hear what mattered to them. They're able to take a step back, zoom out, and think about the overall impact of the work that you've done together. This gives them that opportunity to look at the project from a different perspective and gives them that opportunity to reinforce internally what their own business case was and how it turned out. So that's another benefit to the end client, that this isn't just about you. This also benefits them, both from you not needing to ask them over and over again for references, if that's part of your practice. And then also that they get the opportunity to zoom out and think about the project and what it accomplished and how that might benefit them as they're describing, accomplishments for their own professional advancement internally, as they're positioning their business unit within their company, as they're selling new other business cases within their company, really giving them that opportunity to zoom out and think about the project in a different way. So that's why these testimonials matter for both you and the client. So now let's transition into the four blockers that I most commonly see to securing a powerful client testimonial. The first blocker is that you completely dismiss it. I've already touched on this, right? Some of the thoughts that I often hear are, why would I do these? No one's going to read them anyway. No one will really believe them if they do read them. Like those kinds of statements that are very dismissive of this process. So for you to overcome that, hopefully, first and foremost, us just discussing why these testimonials can matter to your business will help you. And then also for you specifically, get very clear on in what ways will testimonials support, advance, improve your own business and the way that you're running your business development process and the way that you're building your brand. Get very clear about that. Don't ask yourself the question, why are these not needed? Or why won't these work? Or why is this unnecessary? Your brain will give you a lot of reasons as to why that's not the case. Because our brain, as we've talked about on this podcast many times, our brain is trained to answer the question in the literal way we ask it. So if we ask ourselves, why isn't this worth it? Which then leads you to dismiss this altogether, of course, you'll find great answers to that question. So I challenge you to ask the opposite question. In what ways would a testimonial benefit my business specifically and my clients? And answer those two questions. In what ways would testimonial process benefit my business? In what ways will I use these testimonials? In what ways could I use these testimonials in the future? In what ways this testimonial process benefit my own clients? I think that's four questions, four or five questions for you there to ask yourself and answer so you get into a much more productive mental state to problem solve or to answer the question about why have a testimonial process. The second blocker that I often see once you get to the place of I want to have a testimonial operating procedure in my business. The second blocker that I most commonly see is that you don't want to bother your client. We don't want to bother our client. We know how busy our clients are. We don't want them to, have another thing on their to-do list either. And so for that, I challenge you again. I mean, first of all, we've talked about how can this be beneficial to the client themselves. So this isn't just about you. And then also, you're running a business. It is common for a business to have a testimonial process. It is common for a business to have feedback from their clients. This is not about you. This is your business. I want to reinforce this over and over again because it's so easy for us to really equate us with our business, especially if you're a solo or independent consultant. This is business. With the marketing department of your, former employer say, well, we don't want to bother anyone? Absolutely not. Does it mean you need to be aggressive and needy and all of those things? Absolutely. You don't have to do that either. But this is business. So think about it from that perspective. And also make it easy for them. Of course, we don't want to bother or burden our clients. So let's do our best to make it easy for them. And I'll give you more about that in a minute when we transition to best practices. And it's important to know what these blockers are so that you can recognize them in yourself and what you're doing and overcome them. So the third blocker that I often see, almost always, is a fear of rejection. Look, you're a human. You're a human. You're naturally going to have a fear of rejection. It's baked into our DNA. You're worried that they'll say no. And then whatever you were thinking about the project and the success of it goes into question. It's like that stomach punch. Or you might be worried they don't even respond at all. The project is probably going very well or went very well, but you're still worried about them saying no. Again, I implore you to not make this about you. You are running a business. If you were running the corporate marketing department of your business, would you be as worried about them rejecting you? You would not. Now, look, none of us love rejection. So even in the corporate marketing department, I'm sure that they've got some level of fear of rejection. I'm not dismissing that at all, but I will also tell you they're not making it about them. So think about it from that perspective. If you can just put your corporate marketing hat on and remove it one step from it being about you, that can be a great way to overcome this. And look, I've got to say to you very directly, as a business owner, you've got to get better at being open to rejection. The more open to rejection you are, the more successful you'll be. So rather than trying to manipulate and avoid the rejection, as we naturally do as humans, go straight into it. Know that you're going to ask for testimonials, and sometimes the client will say no, or they'll say yes, and then they'll never do it. And we'll talk more about best practices on making it easier for them so that they do it in a minute. But know that if the better you get at asking and being okay if they say no, okay if they ghost you, being okay if they don't even respond, that's where you're building up a muscle as a business owner and ultimately fueling your own success. The fourth blocker that I often see for that prevents you from getting a powerful testimonial, and this one happens a lot less frequently, but it's there. It's there, and we have to talk about it. And that's the idea that you deserve a testimonial, that you're entitled to a testimonial. Look, I've done this before. I know so many of us who have done this before. We think we deserve a testimonial, for example, because we felt like we undercharged, or we gave them more than was agreed to in the statement of work, or they told us how amazing the work was that we were doing. And we create a dynamic in our brain that feels entitled, that we sacrificed a lot and we deserve something in return. Again, you're a human. This happens. But notice that you're doing that. Notice that you're feeling somewhat entitled. Could be a little sliver of entitlement, or could be a lot of entitlement. Like, I deserve this. It looks like I deserve this for whatever reason you've justified in your mind. Notice that before you do anything. Notice that before you send them an email, or notice that before you ask them for a testimonial. Just notice that you are feeling slightly entitled to it, that you deserve it, and don't ask from that place. It comes across so awkward and demanding, assumptive in some ways. Just notice it. I notice I'm feeling a little bit entitled to this, that they owe it to me, and shift yourself into gratitude versus entitlement before you go forward with asking them and executing the process we're about to talk about. All right, my friends, look, we've all done this in some different ways, that we think we're owed something. Just notice it and take action from, and do not take action from that place. All right. So those are the four blockers that at least the first three are very common. The fourth one is a watch out for this thing, watch out for the entitlement, to help you make sure that you are moving forward with asking for testimonials as a standard practice, and that you are asking in a way that is really valuable both to you. You're managing the process in a way that's valuable to you and to the client. Okay, so now as we start to come to a close here, we're going to talk about the four best practices for securing powerful consulting client testimonials. So the first is make it easy for them. I don't know about you, but from time to time, I get people asking me, will you write a recommendation for such and such? I remember one time when I was in corporate, one of my employees came to me and said, "Look, I want to go back to grad school. Will you write a recommendation for me?" Of course, I would love to write a recommendation for him. I was excited for him at the possibility of him going to grad school. I was impressed that he would ask me as his skip level to write a recommendation when, in fact, is probably not to my best interest, to lose him to a grad school program. But of course, I was happy to support him. But I will say the idea of looking at a blank piece of paper and writing a recommendation was incredibly daunting. I ended up doing it, of course, but it was at the last minute. It probably could have been 10 or 20% better than it was. I don't even know if it really exactly followed the narrative that he was trying to create in the overall application. It's just a heavy lift when you say to someone, "Would you be willing to write a recommendation for me? Or would you be willing to give me a testimonial?" Whatever it is. So let's come back to, how do we make this as easy as possible? And the way to make it as easy as possible is to offer a couple of options to your clients. You may say to them, when they say, "Yes, I'd be happy to give a testimonial," then you might say to them, "Look, I want to make this as easy as possible for you. There's a couple of options that we have. Of course, if you want to just write it, that's great. If you would like to record it just verbally, I'll transcribe it and package it together for your approval. Or we can do it interview style where we hop on a Zoom. I record the Zoom, for the purposes of writing the transcript, and then I'll summarize it and give it to you for editing and approval. Or we can just record it as a video, and that's a great way to do it too. No editing required, or very little editing, maybe a little bit in the beginning, a little, cut off the beginning and the end and make it succinct, that kind of thing. So get them to the place where it's just really easy for them. You take off that heavy lifting. You're not asking them to start from scratch. You're giving them a very simple, easy to follow process. The way I do this in my business is I have a standard set of questions. I have a videographer on retainer, and so when clients are graciously willing to give me a testimonial, I introduce them to my videographer. He has our exact interview script that he uses to conduct the interviews. It's done by a third party, so I'm not involved in the interview, so they're welcome to say whatever feels authentic to them without me being on the call and feeling that awkward or pressure, and he helps them prep for it as well. So that can be a really great way to do it too, where you have a process where a third party might help you to just make it very, very easy for them, that interview style. So that best practice, always thinking about, how do I make this really easy for them so that it's not one of those things on their to-do list that is hanging over their head. The second best practice is make it easy for you. Make it easy for you. The more you embed this into the standard of how you do your business, which could look like, ideally, it's a standard. I ask for a testimonial for every implementation. So I don't have to decide, am I going to ask? Am I not going to ask? You make it a standard for every single implementation. And if you ask and the client says no, that's an incredible opportunity to say, "I appreciate your candor. Ask them why." A lot of times we feel mortified and we just kind of shrink back versus just simply asking why. Sometimes it's a corporate policy that they're not allowed to provide a testimonial. So if that's the answer, you may say, "Would you be comfortable giving a testimonial even if we're not able to use your name or your company's name?" And if they say no again, then you may ask, "I'd love to spend 15 minutes, if you have time, diving into why, so that I can improve my processes and so that I can, going forward, I would love some opportunity to figure out what might be missing and what in the work we've done together." So making this part of a standard process for your business and your implementations or your services is incredibly important, so that, again, you take the friction away of having to decide and negotiate with yourself if this is a good client to ask or not. You just make it a part of your process that you do it every time, and you know how you're going to handle it if they say no. You know how you're going to handle it if they don't respond, and you know how you're going to handle it if they say yes, and then you make it easy for them. Another way to make it easy for you is to have standard questions, like I was just describing to you that I have for my business. Again, I put some questions in the show notes so you have a starting point for that. So go over to the show notes. You can find it on my website, melissalieberman.com, under resources and then show notes. And then if you go to this episode, you can just search, if it's not at the top of the list, the show notes, you can just search on testimonials on that page, and it will bring back the show notes and the list of questions. Or you can just click on the link from your podcast, wherever you're listening to the podcast, and get right there. So go get those list of starting point questions and then tailor them to your business. So again, the more you can reduce the number of decisions that you have to make, and the more you can have standard operating procedures, the better you'll be able to overcome those blockers we were talking about. Okay, this third best practice for securing powerful consulting client testimonials is to make them powerful. How do we make the testimonials powerful? One way to do that is to basically position the questions that you're asking kind of in two directions. The first is get a general testimonial. So again, you're filling up that bank, the bank of testimonials that then you have to pull from when you need certain things that you don't not yet know about, or certain scenarios with potential clients that you realize it would be great to have. Always having that bank is really important. So having a general testimonial set of questions in your standard questions is really important to make them powerful. And then also think about, for each client, what a specific case study might be that you would write about that client. What would be the case study you would write about that specific client and highlight the work you've done together? Or what existing case study might you add them to? So it's kind of two examples in one or three examples in one. And then focus your direction on that narrative. Focus some of the questions you're asking on what you think that narrative might be. So you're getting both the more general testimonial and then also more specific to a given case study, for example. Also, to make it powerful, put yourself in the mind of other buyers. What are other buyers thinking about? So the way that I'm thinking about this for you is, when other buyers that are similar to the client that you're interviewing, when they're thinking about solving the problem you've helped your client solve, or they're thinking about achieving the goal you've helped your client achieve, what might be in their mind? What might they be thinking about hiring a consultant versus doing it in-house? What might they be thinking about the likelihood of being able to successfully solve this problem? What are they thinking about? What objections do they have? What do they think makes it not possible or really difficult to solve the problem or achieve the outcome that you help them achieve? If you think about it from that perspective, what might your future buyers be thinking about? And how can this client in front of me who's giving a testimonial advise them? Advise them about how to tackle this problem by leveraging a consultant, and any other advice that they would offer to that other peer in the industry that's experiencing a similar challenge. Think about it from that perspective and then develop your set of questions around that. It's almost as if your client that you're interviewing to give the testimonial is giving advice and expertise and experience, passing it on. And so think about it from that perspective as you're setting up your testimonial acquisition process. And then finally, I've touched on this a little bit, but just to reinforce, you want to balance knowing how you would like to use the testimonial in the short term. Like, you may have some specific ideas about how you're going to use this testimonial. So you may have an idea of how you want to drive the conversation and what you think they are going to say. Be open and expect that they might not say what you think they're going to say. They might tell you kind of one-on-one how amazing you are, and then you get into the testimonial and it's not coming out exactly that same way. Be flexible about where the conversation is going. Again, this is a little bit of a entitlement in a way. I expect they're going to say this certain thing. Who knows what they're going to say? Have a free flowing conversation from a curiosity perspective, especially if you're interviewing them to gain the testimonial. Have a free flowing conversation and see where it goes from a place of curiosity versus expectation. And then finally, the fourth best practice to secure powerful consulting client testimonials is to put it into use. I've talked about creating this bank of testimonials so you have it, but also go put them into place as part of your standard operating procedure in your business for client testimonials. We first talked about doing this as a standard for every implementation or every retainer client, every advisory client, every project based client, every workshop based client, whatever the nature of the business is that you're doing, you're going to have a testimonial process in place for all of those. And then the last step of your standard operating procedure for powerful consulting client testimonials is having a checklist of a couple of places that you want to put the results of this testimonial into action immediately. It might be to add it to a case study. It might be to add it to your website. It might be to ask them to post it as a LinkedIn recommendation. It might be to add it into a white paper. Whatever it is, give yourself a list, a menu of ways you could put it into action in your business. And then you'll have that all ready to go. And when you get the testimonial for a given client, you'll pick a few of those and make sure that it's not just collecting dust, on your Dropbox or Google Drive or SharePoint. You've got those testimonials into action. They might not be everywhere you need them to be. We're not looking for perfect. We're just looking for getting the testimonial so you have the bank, and then also putting it into immediate action so you continue to build upon the experience and expertise that you are accumulating as your consulting practice progresses. All right, my friend, that is what I have for you today for consulting client testimonials. I will remind you to go over to the show notes for this episode and grab your starting list of questions so you can start putting this into action. And then also, we'll put the links to all of this in the show notes. But if you go to my website, melissalieberman.com, work with Melissa menu, and then coaching client results. And you'll see some examples that will hopefully inspire you as you're building out your standard operating procedure for client testimonials. All right. I will see you again next week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.